Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History Spiritual Quest 65th episode. We're walking through chapter 9 of The Impersonal Life. It's a book that's very important to Elvis. It's one that he read many times and he made a lot of annotations. And we're even going to look at one of those annotations today, something Elvis wrote directly into the book. And we're going to do that as soon as we come back from this song, which talks about Elvis's walk through these books, called Word on Fire. Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're going to hear echoes directly from Elvis. We're going to look at a page that he wrote in the book, The Impersonal Life. And he didn't so much write on this particular page as he underlined a whole lot of it. And we're going to look at the underlines that he's made here. We have not actually reached this portion of The Impersonal Life yet, but I thought it might be fun to look ahead a little bit and see what Elvis was thinking about so that we can recognize it when we come upon it in the book. And because we are roughly halfway through the book, and the book, it's built upon repetition about spiraling around the same ideas, by looking at what he's actually underlined, we can see we have a better idea of what he's talking about than if we had just looked at this, say, before we had gotten this far into the book. And what Elvis has underlined, it says, I may be expressing through you beautiful symphonies of sound, color, or language that manifest as music, art, or poetry, according to human terminology, and which so affect others as to cause them to acclaim you as one of the great ones of the day. This must have spoken directly to Elvis. Elvis is expressing himself through beautiful symphonies of sound, through symphonies of color. Think about his wardrobe, especially his stage wardrobe, his jumpsuits and all the rhinestones that he would have on them, the various designs of each suit. That's a symphony of color. Or a symphony of language. Well, Elvis also uses language as part of the sound that's in the lyrics. He doesn't write the lyrics, but he expresses the lyrics. And then this says that manifests as music, art, or poetry. Well, that's all three things that Elvis is doing. Music, which is an art form. It's very artistic when he does it. And there's poetry. That's what the lyrics are. And this says according to human terminology, which means that we have named music, art, poetry, sound, color, language. We've given these words so that we can think about them, but they are in fact, an expression of the divine, at least according to Joseph Benner in this book, The Impersonal Life. Now, Elvis did not underline according to human terminology. I think that means as he looks at this passage, he's not thinking about the distinctions between human language and what is just an expression of the divine. I think he might be saying he likes that terminology because it helps him think about these different expressions. Or he might have meant something else. He definitely wants us to key in on the parts that he has underlined, such as which so affect others as to cause them to acclaim you as one of the great ones of the day. That is the experience that Elvis lived. People acclaimed Elvis. They praised him. And they said he was the king. That means he's a great one of the day. He's the king of rock and roll. And Elvis has underlined most of the next passage, which says, I may be speaking through your mouth. I think that spoke to Elvis as well. He was concerned about the message that he was putting out, especially in the 1970s. What are these songs say? Can people hear the word in any of these songs? I think that's why he included gospel songs. They have a more direct communication of the word. But the word is speaking through his mouth. That's what this passage is saying. The I is the I am. It's the way that Joseph Benner refers to God who lives in your heart. You can think of that through Christian terminology as Jesus in your heart. And that it's your direct communication line with the divine. There's no one in the way. It's you and the divine speaking directly because you are a piece of the divine, a shard of the divine that God has sent here to earth to express some piece of God, such as sound, color, language, music, art, poetry, any of these other things that we give a name to. And I think Elvis, he was concerned about this. This is something he worried about. And now the book is telling him, I may be speaking through your mouth or inspiring you to write many beautiful truths. In Elvis's sense, this might be singing many beautiful truths, communicating many beautiful truths. I think if you've listened to Elvis's songs and you're a fan, you hear truth in the words coming directly through to you. That's one of the things that keeps bringing people back to Elvis's songs. And this says, which may be attracting to you many followers. And that's happening to Elvis as well. He has many, many, many followers since the moment that he cut the first record. That's all right. Once it hit the airwaves, people began to gather, mostly teenagers at that point, but even Marion Keisker, a grown woman, the woman who recognized first, you could say, in Elvis, his special singing ability and brought it to the attention of Sam Phillips, that she was in the crowd when Elvis was at his first public performance after that recording. And that she heard someone screaming. Some girl was screaming for Elvis. And it was so loud. And then she realized it was her. That she, what we might term a middle-aged woman, was screaming her heart out for this 19-year-old boy on stage. Because she heard something in him. And then it says, these followers who hail you as a most wonderful preacher or teacher. So no one says this outright about Elvis, that he's a preacher or a teacher, but these fans are listening. They're listening to what he says. And the next passage that he's underlined, it says, I may even be healing through your diverse. Let me start this over. That is not a very common word. I may even be healing through you diverse diseases, casting out devils, making the blind to see and the lame to walk, and performing other marvelous works, which the world calls miracles. So it mentions healing, and it talks about diseases. And you would think this probably means physical diseases, but I think it could mean spiritual diseases, which in the terms of Joseph Benner is anything which is causing interference with the communication of the I am. And I think that Elvis's songs do cut through the interference for some people and bring them back into communication with the I am. That is healing. Casting out devils. That's the same thing. Taking pieces of yourself or others that you've taken in, pieces that others have told you about or thoughts that they've implanted that you've given strength. And these devils no longer allow you to communicate with God. Some of the songs, I think, help people move through those things. And think about the song Suspicious Mind. Making the blind to see and the lame to walk. These are references to miracles that Jesus performed in the Bible. But there's spiritual blindness. There's an inability to realign, which is to walk towards God. And performing other marvelous works which the world calls miracles. Now, he did not underline anything else that's on this page, but it forms one perfect, or maybe perfect's the wrong word, but it forms a single paragraph. So let's read through this paragraph that we have not yet reached in the impersonal life, and that Elvis, for whatever reason, chose not to underline. Perhaps it didn't resonate with him. Perhaps it's not the message he was looking for at that moment. But it says, yes, all these I may be doing through you, but of absolutely no benefit is any of it to you personally, unless you use and apply these harmonies of sound in your every spoken word, so that to all hearers they will seem as the sweet music of heaven. You got to wonder why he didn't underline that part. Because it's saying that he could apply these harmonies of sound, which is what he actually does, to his every spoken word, which we could interpret as the word he sings, so that to all hearers they will seem as the sweet music of heaven, which I think many Elvis fans would say that's what his music sounds like. But he didn't underline this part. And then it says, and unless you sense of color and proportion, it says, and unless your sense of color and proportion so manifest in your life that only kind, uplifting, helpful thoughts flow from you, proving that the only true art is that of seeing clearly my perfection in all my human expression, and of allowing the quickening power of my love to pour through you into their hearts, picturing to their inner vision my image hidden therein. So he did not underline any of this. And it seems to be indicating that if this isn't happening all the time in your life, that I think with Elvis, it's specifically happening while he's singing. But we know in the 70s, he's having difficult personal times in the sense of interpersonal relationships. Business is crushing, although he's doing fabulous, but those business pieces are always there pushing back at him. There's always the weekly grind of getting out the payroll. And so maybe this doesn't resonate with him in the sense that this isn't what he's living at the moment. Or he may have just bypassed this part. He heard what's above it, and that's what's truly resonating. And now we'll move on to this kind of cheat sheet that I made that shows us the equations of the impersonal life, and it helps us to to take these very long passages that Joseph Benner writes. He's really a fan of very long run-on sentences with lots of commas. In fact, Joseph's relationship with um, punctuation it's very special for Joseph. He has a very personal, and it's not the same relationship most of us have with the punctuation. But it gets difficult to keep it all straight. And he's circling the same ideas many, many times from different angles. And so I've tried to distill those into some simple verbal equations that we can easily grasp and then try to see in future things that we read, including the book of John and the Impersonal Life. But the most important one on this page is the third one down in the left side. It says, I am God equals love. And we're going to take that equation, I am God equals love, and we're going to move over into the book of John, chapter 9. We've already read this section, verses 2 and 3, but I misapplied what Joseph Benner was saying onto this passage, which is, I've now been told, one of the most confusing passages in the Bible. And that I have not seen the truth that we were supposed to see in this passage. And I've muddied these waters. So I just want to go back over this passage and see if I can't show what Benner was saying without misusing Benner, which is, I think, what I did the first time. And we've been over this passage a few times, so it's taken me a while to work this out. In verse 2, Jesus and his disciples are walking somewhere, and they see a blind man. And in verse 2, his disciples ask Jesus, saying, Master, who did sin, this sin or his parents, that he was born blind? And in the next passage, it says, Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. So when I looked at this originally, we got the first part right. His disciples asked Jesus, who did sin, this man or his parents? The disciples are trapped into this line of thought in which physical infirmity, disease, illness is a punishment from God for transgression, for sin. And that it's either because his parents sinned or because he himself did. And therefore he was punished by being blind. Now, if we think about that equation, God is love, it also means, and Joseph Benner has told us, as well as the book of John, that Jesus is not here to punish anyone. That is not the purpose. That is not what God does. He does not send punishments. The punishments that we feel are self-inflicted. And Jesus answers this question very directly. He says, neither the man nor the parents sinned. And he's saying the blindness has nothing to do with the sin. We've also heard this reflected when Elvis looks at beauty and understands that beauty is not a reflection of the spirit. That your spirit can be beautiful while your outside does not reflect that, but that a beautiful outside does not reflect an internally beautiful spirit. So the exterior is not linked to the interior in that way. And the next piece says, that the works of God should be made manifest in him. This is where I made my error. This piece is not, it appears because of the punctuation that they've used in the King James Version and the way they use the words but that this is a continuation of the previous sentence. That Jesus is saying, if they have not sinned, then this is the reason that I've sent, that the man was blinded, so that he would be here at this moment to teach this lesson about, but that is not what he is saying, because that would say, and Gunn pointed this out to me, that Jesus would be saying that God had inflicted blindness on this infant as a form of suffering to teach perhaps the infant, but others like these disciples, this lesson. And that is not the purpose of suffering. There is a portion of Joseph Benner where he's talking about suffering and the fact that suffering has been sent in order to basically teach lessons, is kind of what he's saying. It's to burn away that which is in the path between our communications with God and us. That there could be interference or a fog in that communication. In that this is to burn away that fog. That is what suffering is for. And when Joseph Benner says this, he is writing to adults who are spiritually suffering, who are looking for answers, who perhaps have moved beyond what are unable to understand what the scriptures are saying. They're looking for help with what is being told to them in the scriptures. That's what this book is doing. Now, it can also be read independently. That's the way Larry Geller reads it, is independently, not necessarily attached to the Bible. But they're saying that that suffering bit, that's for adults to understand. This passage is not speaking to an infant suffering. It's easy to think that because we're thinking, well, this blind man has been blind since birth. And that takes us in our minds back to a time when he was an infant. But Jesus is not talking about that. He's not addressing that at all. Why do infants suffer? Why is it brought to them? That is a good question. It's not answered in this passage. It's not being addressed in this passage. I brought that in and it shouldn't have been here. I don't know that I've seen this addressed in the book of John or in the Impersonal Life about the innocents who suffer and how that is supposed to be helping them, because they're not adults, so they're not going to necessarily learn those lessons. There may not be anything in the way between them and talking to God. They're innocents. So that's not addressed here at all. I don't know if it's addressed elsewhere in Benner or in John, but it's a good question. I'm going to keep it in mind. It's not here, is what I'm really wanting to point out. That was my mistake in thinking that suffering part that Joseph Benner was stating applied here. What Jesus is actually saying is that because you, the disciples, have pointed out that this man is blind, and you've asked this question, and you've made it apparent to me through the question that there is a great misunderstanding here about why this man might be blind. I'm not actually going to answer that other than to say you were wrong. But he's here, so we have an opportunity to learn about what God can do and can manifest in this man, which is his healing through his faith because he follows the instructions of Jesus. And then he stands up for Jesus later in the chapter. So I hope that helped clear up this passage, which upon reflection I realize I did not look at that correctly. And let us move on down to where we were, which is in chapter 9, The Garden of Eden, The Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner. Let me kind of scroll down. So in this chapter, it's talking about I think the innocence of man at one point before we put our ego and personality on. Like when the divine shard has first been housed within the mortal body. And then later we develop this personality which is required for survival here on the mortal plane, but we invest it with enough power that it begins to feel as if we can depend only on the personality and we no longer need to communicate with the divine, which is an issue, at least according to Joseph Benner. That would be misalignment. Alignment is when we're able to speak freely with God. Misalignment is when we have turned away in some manner. I like to think about this as like a compass. North is straight to Jesus. South is directly away. All the other compass points are misalignment to some degree. But if you can stay north of the east-west meridian, you're basically heading north. And that's where we all want to be. You should be straight north. That's that straight and narrow path that is always being talked about. Very difficult to maintain. And so Joseph Benner is telling us you must realign over and over. But here he's telling us specifically about the personality. And it says, but before that can be, it will be necessary for you thoroughly to know that supposed other self, that's your personality, that supposed other self. And Benner says that self which you created by thinking it real and separate from me. The thinking is the power that you have invested into it, part of your divine shard, your divine power. That's what makes it powerful and makes it seem separate from me, which is the I am. It's not truly separate. God is love. God equals love. We've already seen that equation. I am God equals love. And I am God equals unity. Love equals unity. Everything is love and unity. There is no separate. And that's what the thinking is. It gives us a feeling or an idea of separate, which we need. We need that, but we can't allow ourselves to think that is the true reality, according to Joseph. The book says, and then kept alive by giving it the power thus to entice and deceive you. And this is saying that you have wrapped yourself in self-delusion. It says, yes, that self-created self, which is purely selfish pride, ambitions, and imagined power. Its love of life, of possessions, of being thought wise or good, but which self is merely your human personality, which was born only to die as a separate identity. And as such, has no more reality or permanence than the leaf, the snow, or the cloud. I think you could also think of this as hairs and fingernails. Hair and fingernails are pieces of us. They perform specific things that we need done as a mortal creature. We have hair for a purpose, even though we don't necessarily need it anymore because we use clothing and such, but we have purposes for hair, including expression of identity. And we have fingernails to protect the ends of our fingers, but we regularly shed these pieces of ourselves, but we're still ourselves. We're still the unity. These are separate pieces that were never truly separate. And even when we let them go, they're still part of the unity. I know I'm not explaining that well at all, but it's like the leaf that falls off of the tree. The best part of the leaf, everything it did, everything it ever was, is still in the tree. And it says, yes, you will be brought face to face with that petty personal self and will see with perfect vision all of its sordid selfishness and human vanity. And I just have to wonder what Elvis thought when he read this passage, because he did have some petty pieces of his personal self. We all do. And we've heard some people saying he was vain, that he couldn't pass a mirror without combing his hair. And I think he had strong career reasons that he needed to comb his hair and he needed to look in the mirror, but maybe he did have some vanity. I'm not going to put it past him. I'm sure if I'd been as good looking as Elvis, I'd have been a little bit vain about it. And that's a petty personal self. That's kind of what this is talking about. We've all got those pieces of ourselves. And we will see with perfect vision all its sordid selfishness and human vanities. And Elvis had selfishness and human vanities as well. And he had a lot of people around him that were petty and had sordid selfishness and human vanities. So you just have to wonder what he saw in the passage when he read it. But then it says, and you will then learn. So it tells Elvis something. And you will then learn if you will but turn to me and ask in simple faith and trust that it is I, the infinite, impersonal part of you, abiding always within. So that impersonal, that is not impersonal as we like to think of it here in 2026 as being negative. If I go to a store, I want to get some personal attention. If I go to a restaurant, I want personal attention from the waitress or the waiter or the serving staff. This is not impersonal in that sense that you'll be treated with rudeness or coldness. It's in the sense that there is the personal you. That's the part that you think of as separate from the unity. And there is the impersonal part of you, that divine shard that knows it is part of the unity. That part that never leaves the unity. That always recognizes the communication with the I am, even when you can't hear it. The part that's always abiding within. So impersonal in this sense means divine in the terms of unity. There is no personal. Everything is one. And that part of you, there's that part of you within that knows that you are part of this unity. You're never alone. You're always together with others. But some of us, as we move through misalignment, force ourselves into solitude, which is an inability to feel and transmit love, or a denial of the ability to feel and transmit love. It's more of a denial because we never lose the ability. We just deny our ability to use it. And it says that this impersonal part is the part who am thus pointing out to you all these illusions of the personality, which for so many ages have separated you in consciousness from me, your glorious divine self. And this is pointing out the fog or the wall that you build between yourself and communication with the divine. You could also think of it as turning south on the compass. If you turn your back to the divine, you can't see him. And you can't really communicate because you don't see that he's back there. You're pretending that he's gone and that you are not a piece of him. And this says, this realization will surely come when you can recognize that this message is from me. And when you have determined that, it shall be. So the book is saying, hey, you're reading this in a book. This book was written by Joseph Benner. You know that. But it's me, God, talking to you through the book. And of course, you're not going to believe that immediately. You've got some discretion, and I've given you that discretion on purpose. But you are going to sooner or later recognize that this is a message directly from me to you. That's why you have the book. It's come to you in this form so that I can speak to you. Benner said that the word comes in many, many forms. The book is just one of them. And in this case, the book has come to Elvis because he has been searching. And it says, to you, whom I have inspired with such a determination. And I think this might have spoken directly to Elvis again because he was determined. He was on this search. He'd brought Larry in, and Larry was bringing the books. And Elvis wanted to search through these books for this resonance with the Bible, with things he already believed and knew to be true. But he needed help with the vocabulary and new paths to spiral his thoughts around these truths, which is what Benner provides. It says, to you, whom I have inspired with such determination, I will cause every illusion in time to disappear, and you shall in truth know me. Now, I really like this passage. It says, I will cause every illusion in time to disappear. So in time could mean at some point in the future, as you continue to study the book and other spiritual texts, other forms of the word, that these illusions are going to disappear. But it also could mean every illusion in time, meaning time is an illusion. These other illusions exist within the illusion of time. And eventually you're going to understand that time is not real because time does not exist for God. Time is a perspective of man. It says the exercise of your mind along these abstract lines will not hurt you. So the book addresses fear. Some fear that we have that this is too hard to think about. I don't want to go down these paths. I just want the book to tell me, and then I can just move on. Or this book disagrees with things that I already believe to be true, And I don't want to think about those parts either. And perhaps that could pull me away from God. It could add misalignment, push me into misalignment. That's a common fear of these metaphysical books. But it says the exercise of your mind along these abstract lines will not hurt you. So the book reassures that's not true. That if your foundation and your communication lines with the I am are strong, yeah, these ideas in the book can't hurt it. You'll see through whatever is not true, and therefore your communication lines will stay strong. However, it's also acknowledged just in the previous passage that we have discernment, and that we've been given that so that we can, because we don't necessarily believe it's even God talking to us through this book at this moment. Nor should anyone. This is just words on a page that were printed by a man. So you have to find the resonance and be sure that it's true. That's what Elvis was underlining and writing the annotations about. And then the book says, instead, it is what your mind needs. So it doubles down and says, not only are these ideas not going to hurt you, thinking about ideas outside of your formulated circle, that's a good thing for you. And that only through this form of thinking can we unite with those who are outside the circles of our thought. And I think that's speaking to Elvis because he's in a Christian circle that has excluded others who he knows to be good people. And that's part of what Benner is doing, is he's expanding the circle. And then it says, for not until you can grasp my meaning when presented to you in ideas such as these herein contained, coming from without, can you perceive correctly and interpret my idea when I inspire you from within. All right, this is important. For it says, you will not be able to grasp. Well, it doesn't say you're not able to. It says that you're going to be able to grasp the meaning in the book, because you will recognize internally from your internal truth, your communication with the I am, that what's being said in the book resonates with those messages. That these messages in the book are coming from outside of yourself, but they're going to resonate with what's inside of yourself. And that's what tells you this is true. It says, your mind, I am, and that's capitalized to mean that's the voice of God. Your mind, I am, or God, thus preparing for use. God is preparing you, not to gain more earthly knowledge, but in order that you can receive and give forth my heavenly knowledge to those whom I shall bring to you for that purpose. God is love. God is sending you love. You are love. And part of your purpose is to transmit that love to others. And that love is not earthly knowledge. It's the grace in which we exist that's given by God. And the book says, so with a prayer to me, your own real self, your God within, that true realization may come, and that you may see the truth in these statements, and in all things, conditions, and experiences that may come to you. Let us proceed. So the book is setting up that it's going to give us more ideas that will stretch our thoughts, whatever our circle of confinement to those thoughts is now. It's going to stretch those. And that's going to allow us to understand more fully these ideas that God is going to give us, which we could also think of as love. The ideas that God sends us, divine inspiration, that's love. As well as divine desire, that's love as well. The truth is love. And that's what we're going to transmit on when God has prepared our minds through the Bible and through these ancillary texts, such as the impersonal life. And that is where we're going to stop for today and come back in the next episode to move more through this chapter 9 of the impersonal life. I'm going to leave you today with a song like I always do. And that song is going to be Word on Fire, that talks about Elvis actually walking through these texts. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me today and spending your time here with Hillbilly Cat History as we walk through these very dense and difficult texts and try to learn more about what Elvis was thinking and what was he looking for. And until I see you all again, you all keep on taking care of business.
Black book in his pocket, gold letters on the right. No,